So there's a semi-viral video going around Twitter from Guy Verhofstadt, the chief negotiator for Brexit on behalf of the European Union, and generally weird-looking creeper. And he's got this hashtag, I am European. There's a lot here that needs to be addressed because the things that he is saying strike right to the very core of what it is to be a person and how we perceive ourselves in the world in comparison to everyone else and in relation to our own personal position. So let's get on with it.
Right-wing populists and nationalists want you to believe that you have only one identity.
Well, I guess that I would be considered a right-wing populist nationalist at this point, which honestly is something that I would otherwise not consider myself to be. But I think that the question isn't, is someone a virulent chest-beating nationalist? The question is, where do they lie in regards to the anti-national global sort of superstructure of the sort of, I don't know, the technocracy, the global technocracy or something? I don't know how to describe it. But the sort of network of people who feel that they are not connected to their home countries because perhaps they are so used to travelling around the world. And they would like to see a united world with absolutely no national barriers. I guess that in relation to these people, yeah, I look like a national populist because I think that the nation state should serve the interests of its own citizens, and I think that the existence of the nation state is a good thing, so I guess that's me. But I don't think that you have only one identity at all, and I think that anyone who suggests that you have only one identity is not only wrong but also lying to you. People are made up of many different identities, which they bring to the fore. They sort of engage in many different circumstances. I mean, for example, if I'm going to play video games, then I guess I'll be engaging my identity as a gamer and the sort of patterns of behavior that usually involves. But these patterns of behavior I wouldn't display or demonstrate in other situations. If I was a Christian and I went to church, or a Muslim and I went to a mosque, I wouldn't at the same time be presenting my gamer identity because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to start shouting mean words at people with whom I disagreed across the mosque or the church or whatever. I would then have my religious identity come to the fore, and that would be what I was presenting at the time because it would be context appropriate. I would be around other Muslims or Christians rather than being around other gamers. It's a way of socially signalling what you are to the people around you so they can have a predetermined idea of at least something about you so they don't have to spend all their time and effort having to interrogate every single goddamn person around them in a social setting to find out what is and isn't an appropriate method of behavior. It means that we can be social with great ease, to have many different identities. And so when he says, oh, you've only got one identity, bollocks. Perhaps it's that you think that we think that you only have one identity because all you talk about is converting people to this European identity. Aren't we all Europeans, really? Fuck our nation states, we're all Europeans. And I'm afraid it just ain't going to work that way.
That you have to choose between your regional, national and European identity.
I'm not even sure how much of an identity being European really is. And it certainly doesn't play much into my daily thought process. I mean, there are some places in Europe I don't want to go, and there are lots of places outside of Europe that I do want to go to. And that's, I don't know, I mean, is that part of the identity? I mean, it seems that you kind of have to fabricate this thing from whole cloth, and it looks like an unbelievably soft, left-wing, just weak version of what I would consider what they consider a European to be. I mean, personally, I would consider Europeans to be stern and austere and violent and aggressive. You know, I mean, looking back at the history of Europe, I wouldn't think people like this. But the thing is, the identity is just one core part of it. I mean, within the identity come a set of values. And in that set of values, the overarching European identity might well be compatible enough so that there's no real difference between those value sets. And I think that on the continent, for like France and Germany and possibly Belgium and the Netherlands, that might be the case. You know, that might be the case. I'm not saying that it is, and I know that there are going to be people who certainly reject that. But I maybe in general that's something. But I think in Britain there's definitely there's a different worldview that the majority of the population hold to, and we know that because they actually demonstrated it in a vote. that doesn't like the unaccountable nature of the European Union and the way it's being run. And it's the methods. It's not really the goal, it's the methods. If you would say, well, I mean, we would just in principle all agree to some sort of brotherhood of Europeans, of European nations, where we'll all cooperate with one another and we'll be allies, then I think that everyone in Britain would sign up for that. I don't see what the argument would be against that. Everyone would be in favour of it. When you say you need to start giving up your nationhood, and we're going to start raising taxes, we're going to create an army, we're going to create a single zone with one internal border, then you're losing a lot of people, and that goes against their values, which is maintaining the sovereignty of their country. And so, yeah, it is a conflict there, and we have to address that dead on. And I'm afraid, Mr. Verhofstadt, if the question is it our values or your values? I'm sorry that my national values conflict with what you perceive to be European values, but have you considered that European values might not be as universal and all-pervasive as you think?
Well, we say no. We say you are free to choose. You can be proud of your national or regional identity and at the same time of your European identity.
Well, I also agree that you're free to choose, and this is not why I'm demanding that the Ramonas be kicked out of Britain for being anti-British. I mean, I don't describe them as being anti-British, because I think they should be free to choose. But the problem that you have with people being free to choose stuff, Mr. Verhofstadt, which is something the European Union has learned through the long history of referendums they've either made people re-vote on until they got the right answer or just ignored, is that sometimes people choose the thing you don't like. And when people choose the thing you don't like, suddenly you're like, well, this isn't going to stand. This is flying in the face of our glorious European project. I mean, you should be free to choose as long as you choose what we fucking want you to choose.
We say we are proud Europeans too. And this year, Europe will hold important European elections.
You can be proud Europeans all you want. No one is criticising the idea of you saying, well, I'm a proud European. I mean, okay, to be fair, there is something about it that kind of annoys me, because what annoys me about this is that you seem to have some kind of moral claim over my personal and political beliefs, which you don't. And if I decide that being a European is not the same as what you decide being a European is, then you're not going to accept that there is a difference of opinion on this. You're going to claim that I'm in the wrong. So I have a problem with that. And secondly, I don't think the European elections are as important as you think they are, because I think that the European Parliament is just a rubber stamping, like, group-minded organisation. But that's only because I've been there and I've watched you act.
And we are standing against the nationalists who want to destroy the unity of Europe. Let's reform Europe instead of destroying it.
Let's reform Europe instead of destroying it. That's really interesting. You weren't saying that before Brexit, were you? You weren't saying that when you thought everything looked hunky-dory and the European project of further centralisation and assimilation was going according to plan. But now the nationalists are here to destroy the European Union, which I would have thought was outside of their power, but you clearly don't. You clearly view us as a real and present danger to the European project of a single hegemonic empire, if you will. It's honestly fucking amazing to me that you would have the balls to say, oh, well, let's reform Europe instead of destroying it. It's like, well, we wouldn't have to destroy it if you weren't so intransigent at every step of the way. And you weren't so goddamn dogmatic and determined to form your perfected European superstate that it would need reform. I mean, a state normally goes through a process of gradual reform as people vote in different politicians to implement different policies to guide the state in the way that the population want it to go. But that hasn't happened with the European Union because, frankly, you're a bunch of latent tyrants and you are just putting in place the superstructure for you to be able to really put the boot in. I'm sorry, at this point, I view Europe and the people running it, the European Union and the people running it, to be an illegitimate institution of jumped-up bureaucrats who, frankly, should be on the fucking dole line looking for a new job.
And together, let's reject the return to the darkest days of European history. Let's be proud to say, I'm European.
Do you think that the Nazis are going to explode across Europe? Are you threatening us with Nazis explode. What happens if the European Union fails? Are you going to be leading some kind of Nazi uprising to form the Fourth Reich or something? No one thinks that if we leave the European Union, we're going to go to war in Europe. No one thinks that the European Union is what is preventing war in Europe. No one thinks that outside of the bubble of the European Union. They say that in the Parliament, though. That is always the last thing that they go to. And whenever I speak to any activists about it, I'm always like, okay, well, do you think we're going to go to war with Europe if the European Union, if we leave it or if it dissolves? And they go, well, no. It's like, well, there we go then. Don't fucking mention it. You don't need to bring up the war. You don't need to bring up Nazis. You don't need to bring up dark days. Because as far as anyone's concerned, there is nothing but dark days in Europe's future. How many crises does Europe need? The rising populist far right, the invasion of Europe by millions of migrants, to the point which is directly tied, just in case you're wondering, the financial crises, the unresolved financial crises of Greece, Italy, Spain and Portugal, which are not going to get any better, they're just going to get worse because the euro is pegged to Germany. It's not something we can get, or they can get out of. Thank God we didn't even get into it. Thank God. I mean, Europe is just, and then, oh my God, and then what the European Union wants to do to the internet, and it never ends. It never ends because it's just bureaucrats regulating because that is their job and somehow simultaneously their personal desires. Personally, I view the European Union as one of the biggest threats to the peace, freedom and security of Europe because it is being run by lunatic ideologues who think they can ignore reality in favour of trying just desperately this one last push over the top to reach the promised land.